Good evening, everyone. Today we're going to talk about temptation, but we're not going to talk about giving in to temptation, but overcoming temptation. See, we often find ourselves in situations where we are tempted by something, such as being tempted to gossip about someone else in the workplace, at school, wherever, or even being tempted to fall into materialism as we scroll through our phones on social media. But before we can even dive into temptation, we must first define what it is. So temptation is the inner struggle or desire to do something that goes against one's values, morals, or principles. Temptation often arises when there is a choice between right and wrong, or when we're faced with something that appeals to our desires but may lead us astray. So to talk more about temptation, what we're going to do is we're going to dive into a story from Genesis chapter 39. This is the story of Joseph and Potiphar's wife. See, Joseph has been sold into slavery into Egypt by his brothers because they get jealous of him, and he works his way up through the system, and he ends up with Potiphar and working in his household. Well, one day Potiphar's gone doing his thing, and Potiphar's wife comes up to Joseph and tries to tempt him into laying with her. And Joseph, being a man of God, being a man of Yahweh, being a man of the Israelite God, he knows that this is wrong, that it will bring shame not only upon himself, but upon Potiphar and even Potiphar's wife. So what he does is he runs away from that temptation, literally runs away. He leaves out of Potiphar's house with Potiphar's wife still holding Joseph's robe. He chooses to run away. He chooses not to give in to temptation. But not all the stories in the Bible are full of people who turn away from the temptation. We have David and Bathsheba, when David sees Bathsheba bathing on the rooftop, and so he sends for her, ends up sleeping with her, and then he ends up bringing his best friend back in, Uriah, to try and get him to lay with his wife, to hide the fact that his wife is now, Bathsheba is now pregnant. And when that doesn't work, because Uriah is a good man who doesn't want to sleep with his wife while his men are on the front lines, David sends him off to the front lines to be killed, essentially murdering his best friend to hide the result of his temptation. But there's also a great story in the New Testament right after Jesus is baptized. He goes off in the wilderness, and he's there for 40 days and 40 nights, being fasting, getting ready for his earthly ministry. And once that's over, Satan comes to him and tries to tempt Jesus by telling him to throw himself off the highest pinnacle of the temple, by turning rocks into bread so he may eat, and even offering him the kingdom of the world. And Jesus uses the Bible, uses his words, uses the Holy Spirit, uses all those things to turn Satan away and to turn away from that temptation. And that reminds me of Hebrews chapter 4, verses 14 through 16, where the writer of Hebrews tells us that we don't have a great high priest who doesn't know our struggles, who doesn't know our temptations, because he has overcome and gone through all that. He knows our weaknesses, because not only was he 100% man, he was 100% God. It also reminds me of from James chapter 1, verses 14 through 15, where it reminds us that each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their evil desire and enticed. This shows that there's a natural inclination for temptation, the nature of temptation. It shows us that temptation is always there, it's always looking around the corner, but we know that we have Christ in us because we have Christ to turn to when that temptation comes. And how we know that is from 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13, where we see that it says, God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, always providing a way out. Not to paraphrase that verse, but the key point there is that God will always provide a way out. He provided Joseph a way out. He provided David a way out, even though he didn't choose to take it. There's always a way out of our temptation. And one way we can do to make sure that we have a way out, we set ourselves up for success when it comes to temptation and getting out of it, is we can have accountability partners. I know many people use them for things for addictions and stuff like that they have on the internet. We also can have mentors around us, good Christian mentors, good people who will just be there to kind of hold us and keep us on the path and keep us from going astray. So as we walk through life, as we go through life, we need to keep in mind that yes, temptation's always there. That temptation will always be there to try to lead us astray. But know that we have a great high priest, as it says in Hebrews, that knows our weaknesses because he suffered them as well. But because of him not giving into temptation, we have someone we can turn to who can lead us to stay on the path and not be led astray. Thank you.